If one desires to make demons flee, it is not enough to rebuke them with empty words or momentary resolve. One must build a life where they cannot dwell, a fortress where their whispers fall into silence. First, you must know this: evil is not powerful in itself. It thrives on deception. It masquerades as convenience, as pleasure, as something harmless. But the greatest trick of darkness is to make you believe that it does not exist. If you deny its reality, you lower your guard, and that is when it thrives. So, what must you do to drive it away? The first step is to embrace truth, unyielding, absolute, and often uncomfortable truth. Darkness hates truth because truth exposes. It brings light to hidden places, revealing where decay has set in. The one who speaks truth, who lives by it, and who refuses to barter with deceit, becomes unbearable to the forces that seek to corrupt. Next, there must be discipline. No fortress is built overnight, and no army wins by chance. The man who masters himself, who trains his mind and body in virtue, who prays not only when he is desperate but as a habit, is the one who cannot be shaken. Evil preys on the weak-willed, on those who drift through life without purpose. To stand firm, you must anchor yourself in wisdom, practice discernment, and refuse to entertain what you know to be poison for your soul. But beware, solitude can be a snare. The lone traveler is the easiest to ambush. Strength is found not only in personal resolve, but in the company of the wise. Surround yourself with those who uplift, who challenge, who sharpen your mind and soul. An isolated man is a vulnerable one, and demons whisper loudest to the lonely. Most importantly, know that mere human strength will never be enough. There is a greater force, a radiant light, that no darkness can withstand. Align yourself with what is truly good, with that which is beyond yourself. Call upon the strength that evil cannot comprehend, and you will find that you are no longer fighting alone. Do this: embrace truth, live in discipline, walk with the wise, and call upon divine strength and watch as the shadows retreat. Demons flee not from loud words, but from lives that are unshakably rooted in light. Darkness has no power over the one who has left no room for it to dwell. Evil does not always arrive with a roar. More often, it comes as a whisper. It does not seek to terrify at first sight, but rather to persuade, to convince, to make itself seem reasonable. This is why so many fail to recognize its presence until it has already taken root. Unlike the grand battles depicted in myths, real evil seldom appears as an obvious monster. It is far more likely to present itself as something trivial, something justifiable, something harmless at least at first. The greatest advantage that evil possesses is deception. It never introduces itself as evil. Instead, it appears as necessity, as compromise, as a small bending of the rules for a greater good. In this way, it slowly gains ground in the life of a person, making each successive step easier than the last. A lie that is excused once will soon be excused again, and before long, deception becomes a habit rather than an exception. Evil does not need to force its way in. It merely needs permission, and once given an inch, it takes a mile. Another common misconception is that evil is always violent or chaotic. While that is sometimes true, its most dangerous form is quiet, insidious, and persuasive. It is far easier to resist something obviously destructive than it is to recognize and reject something that seems beneficial in the moment. Many have walked willingly into corruption not because they sought destruction, but because they were convinced they were doing what was necessary. This is why discernment is critical. One must learn to distinguish between what is truly good and what only appears good on the surface. Furthermore, evil often works through subtle discouragement. It does not need to make a person commit great acts of wickedness. It simply needs to keep them from pursuing what is good. A man does not need to be made wicked to be ineffective. He only needs to be distracted, preoccupied, and weighed down by trivialities. It is a slow erosion, not an immediate collapse. A soul that once burned with purpose and conviction can be gradually dimmed by comfort, by endless distractions, by the pursuit of things that ultimately do not matter. Fear is one of evil's most effective tools. It does not need to overpower, it only needs to make one hesitate. A moment of doubt, a second of uncertainty, can be enough to halt a person's resolve. Fear convinces people that standing for truth will cost too much, that resisting temptation is too exhausting, that fighting against wrong is futile. And so, many give up not because they are defeated, but because they are convinced they cannot win. One of the most deceptive lies that evil tells is that it is invincible. It seeks to create the illusion that resistance is futile, that it has already won, that darkness is inevitable. This is its most dangerous illusion. In reality, evil thrives only where it is allowed to exist. It cannot stand in the presence of unwavering truth and righteousness. It has no real power over those who refuse to entertain it. But if it can convince people otherwise, it can keep them trapped in a cycle of apathy and defeat. Evil is also patient. It does not always rush to claim a person in one swift moment. Sometimes it is content to wait. It plants seeds of doubt, nurtures small compromises, and allows habits to form over years. It understands that it does not need to force its way in if it can simply wear a person down over time. This is why vigilance is necessary. One cannot afford to be careless, thinking that small lapses in judgment are meaningless. Every thought entertained, every compromise justified, every excuse made is a potential foothold. It is also important to recognize that evil rarely works alone. It spreads through culture, through society, through influences that shape thinking and behavior without people even realizing it. It normalizes what was once unthinkable, makes the unacceptable seem inevitable, and encourages individuals to conform rather than question. This is why critical thinking is essential. One must constantly examine the messages they are receiving, the values they are adopting, and the ideas they are embracing. Not everything that is widely accepted is good, and not everything that is rejected by society is wrong. Many assume that recognizing evil is easy, that it will always appear obvious, that it will always feel wrong. But the reality is far more complex. The most dangerous lies are the ones that feel true, and the most effective deceptions are the ones that appeal to a person's desires, fears, and pride. Evil does not merely tempt with what is blatantly wrong, it often tempts with what seems reasonable, practical, or even necessary. To truly understand the nature of evil, one must develop a keen sense of awareness. It is not enough to avoid outright wickedness. One must also be wary of anything that dulls conviction, weakens resolve, or leads to compromise. Evil does not demand immediate surrender. It only asks for small, gradual concessions. But those concessions, over time, lead to complete submission. A person who wishes to remain free from the influence of evil must constantly guard their thoughts, their habits, and their decisions. They must question what they accept without thought, challenge what seems harmless but has the potential to corrupt, and refuse to be led by convenience rather than conviction. It is not enough to simply reject evil when it is obvious. One must be vigilant against its subtle, creeping influence at all times. Truth is the great enemy of deception, and deception is the very lifeblood of evil. Where truth shines, falsehood crumbles. This is why those who seek to manipulate, control, or corrupt first seek to distort what is real. They do not need to erase truth entirely. They only need to blur its edges, to make it seem uncertain, to plant the idea that perhaps there is no absolute truth at all. If this doubt is allowed to take root, then everything becomes subjective, and when everything is subjective, nothing is sacred, nothing is stable, and nothing is safe. Lies are the foundation of all evil. No act of wickedness is ever committed without first justifying it through some form of deception. A man does not betray his principles unless he convinces himself that they do not truly matter. A society does not collapse into corruption unless it first embraces comforting falsehoods over uncomfortable truths. Evil cannot sustain itself in the presence of unwavering truth, because truth exposes, and exposure is the death of all deceit. Truth, however, is not always welcomed. It is often met with resistance, not because it is unclear, but because it demands something of those who encounter it. To embrace truth fully means to abandon illusion, to strip away comfortable lies, to see things as they truly are, rather than as one wishes them to be. This is no easy task, for people do not merely believe lies, they cling to them. Lies offer justification, excuse, and escape. Truth, on the other hand, requires accountability, demands action, and leaves no room for compromise. The battle between truth and deception is not fought only in the realm of ideas. It is waged in the mind of every individual. Every person, at some point, is presented with the choice to either accept truth, no matter how difficult, or to reject it in favor of something easier, something that does not require change. It is in these moments that the course of a life is set. Those who choose truth, even when it is painful, build lives on unshakable foundations. Those who reject it, even in small ways, begin a slow descent into self-deception and, ultimately, into destruction. Truth is not something that needs to be created or molded to fit a preference set, simply is. It does not shift with the times, nor does it bend to personal desires. It stands firm, unmoving, regardless of who accepts or rejects it. This is why evil seeks not to destroy truth, for it cannot be destroyed, but rather to distort it, to make it seem unknowable, debatable, or irrelevant. The moment truth is regarded as a matter of opinion, it loses its power in the minds of those who should be standing upon it. Fear is one of the most effective tools used to suppress truth. People remain silent not because they do not know what is right, but because they fear the cost of standing for it. The truth can be costly. It may lead to loss of reputation, rejection, or even persecution. But the alternative is far worse. To live by lies, to remain silent in the face of deception, is to surrender to darkness without resistance. The world does not fall into chaos because of the few who actively seek to spread falsehood, but because of the many who refuse to speak when they recognize it. Truth is not merely something to be acknowledged, it must be actively lived out. It is not enough to know what is right if that knowledge does not translate into action. To claim to believe in truth while living in contradiction to it is to be no better than those who deny it altogether. Truth demands integrity, consistency, and courage. It cannot be something spoken only when convenient. It must be something upheld, even when the consequences are severe. One of the most subtle but effective ways in which truth is undermined is through distraction. A world that is constantly bombarded with trivialities, endless entertainment, and shallow concerns has little time or energy left to pursue truth. People who are too busy, too entertained, or too overwhelmed to think deeply are easily led by whatever is most convenient. In this way, deception does not always require force, it simply requires exhaustion. When people no longer have the patience or willpower to seek what is true, they will settle for whatever is presented to them. Truth must be pursued with intentionality. It is not something that will simply appear when needed. It must be sought after, studied, and internalized. Those who wish to live by truth must train their minds to recognize deception, to question narratives, and to reject anything that contradicts what is real. This requires discernment, patience, and an unyielding commitment to what is right, even when it is unpopular. The cost of ignoring truth is far greater than the cost of embracing it. A society built on deception will eventually collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. An individual who continually compromises on truth will eventually find themselves lost, unable to distinguish between what is real and what is not. Truth may be difficult, it may be uncomfortable, and it may come at a great cost, but it is the only foundation upon which anything of lasting value can be built. Discipline is the wall that protects the soul from corruption. It is not built in a day, nor is it maintained without effort. Without discipline, a person is like an unguarded city, vulnerable to every assault, easily swayed by every temptation, and incapable of standing firm when adversity comes. Those who lack discipline are not necessarily evil, but they are weak, and weakness is all that darkness requires to take root. No great downfall happens in an instant. Corruption is rarely a sudden collapse. It is almost always a slow erosion. A habit neglected here, a small indulgence justified there, a compromise made for the sake of convenience. Each step seems harmless on its own, but together they form a path toward destruction. This is why discipline is not optional. It is the safeguard against the gradual decay that so often goes unnoticed until it is too late. Self-mastery is the first and most essential form of discipline. A person who cannot control their own desires, impulses, and thoughts is already defeated. It does not matter how much knowledge, talent, or potential one has if they are ruled by their emotions. They will always be at the mercy of their circumstances. The disciplined person, however, does not act based on fleeting feelings, but on what is right and necessary. They do not seek comfort above all else. They seek strength, knowing that true freedom comes not from indulging every desire, but from mastering them. Discipline is not only about avoiding obvious wrongdoing, it is about training oneself for excellence in all areas of life. A soldier does not wait until the day of battle to prepare. He trains daily, strengthening his body, sharpening his skills, and disciplining his mind so that when war comes, he is ready. In the same way, a person must cultivate habits of discipline long before they face moments of great temptation or trial. If one waits until the moment of crisis to develop self-control, it will already be too late. Laziness is one of the greatest enemies of discipline. It does not appear dangerous at first. It disguises itself as rest, as ease, as harmless procrastination. But laziness is a slow poison. A person who consistently chooses comfort over effort will find themselves incapable of handling even the smallest difficulties. Discipline requires doing what is necessary, even when it is unpleasant, even when it is exhausting, even when no one is watching. The disciplined person does not wait for motivation, they act because they have trained themselves to do so. The undisciplined mind is easily manipulated. It is drawn to distractions, controlled by emotions, and swayed by every new idea that comes along. A person without discipline is not only vulnerable to external influences, but also to their own worst instincts. They are prisoners of their impulses, reacting rather than deciding, following rather than leading. But the disciplined mind is fortified. It does not bend to every passing whim. It stands firm, guided by wisdom rather than convenience. Discipline in speech is as important as discipline in action. Words have power, and those who speak without control over their tongue bring destruction upon themselves and others. A person who says whatever they feel in the moment, without consideration or restraint, is no different from one who acts recklessly, without thought of consequence. Silence, patience, and careful speech are the marks of a disciplined individual. They understand that not everything needs to be said, that some words are better left unspoken, and that true wisdom is shown not in how much one speaks, but in how carefully one chooses their words. Routine is the foundation upon which discipline is built. Habits, once established, become second nature, making discipline easier to maintain. A person who trains themselves to wake early, to read, to work diligently, to pray, to reflect, and to exercise self-control in small things will find that when greater challenges come, they are already prepared. Routine is not a prison. It is a path to freedom. It ensures that what is necessary is done, regardless of fleeting emotions or temporary desires. Discipline is often mistaken for restriction, but in reality, it is the highest form of liberation. The person who has mastered themselves is free from addiction, from regret, from wasted time, from destructive habits. The undisciplined person, on the other hand, is enslaved to their cravings, their distractions, their laziness. What appears to be freedom, the ability to do whatever one wishes without restraint, is actually the deepest form of bondage. True strength comes not from indulgence, but from the ability to say no to what weakens the soul. The disciplined person does not only act rightly in moments of crisis, they live rightly in the ordinary, everyday moments when no one is watching. They do not wait until they are tempted to build resistance, nor do they wait until they are in danger to prepare themselves. They train daily, strengthening their mind, body, and spirit, so that when difficulties come, they do not fall. Righteousness is not merely a state of being, it is a practice, a habit, a discipline that must be lived out daily. It is not enough to know what is good, nor is it enough to desire what is good. One must do what is good. Knowledge without action is meaningless, and intention without follow-through is useless. Righteousness is demonstrated not in thoughts or words alone, but in deeds that reflect an unwavering commitment to truth, integrity, and virtue. Every action a person takes either strengthens or weakens their moral resolve. No deed is insignificant, For character is not built in great moments of decision, but in the small, daily choices that form the foundation of a life. A person does not suddenly become righteous when faced with great temptation or adversity. They reveal what they have already become. The one who has practiced righteousness in the small things will stand firm in the great trials, while the one who has neglected righteousness in daily life will find themselves defenseless when true testing comes. Righteous actions do not happen by accident. They require intention, effort, and a conscious rejection of anything that contradicts virtue. It is easy to be kind when kindness is expected, to be honest when honesty is praised, to be disciplined when discipline is rewarded. But righteousness is proven when one chooses what is right, even when it is difficult, even when it is costly, even when it is unseen. The measure of a person's virtue is not found in what they do when all eyes are on them, but in what they do when no one is watching. Fear often stands in the way of righteousness. The fear of rejection, the fear of suffering, the fear of standing analogies are the forces that silence truth, that prevent action, that keep people in a state of moral paralysis. But righteousness requires courage. To do what is right in a world that often rewards deceit and compromise is an act of defiance against darkness. Cowardice does not manifest in obvious betrayal, but in quiet inaction, in the refusal to act when action is needed. The righteous do not hesitate to confront wrong, not because they are fearless, but because they fear failing to do what is right more than they fear the consequences of doing so. Righteousness is not only about avoiding wrongdoing, it is about actively pursuing what is good. It is not enough to refrain from lying, one must speak the truth. It is not enough to avoid harming others, one must seek to help them. It is not enough to reject corruption, one must build integrity. True righteousness is not passive. It is aggressive in its pursuit of justice, mercy, and goodness. Evil thrives in the absence of righteousness, not merely in the presence of wrongdoing. The greatest enemy of righteous action is complacency. Many do not fall into corruption because they have chosen evil, but because they have chosen nothing. They do not stand against falsehood, not because they believe it, but because it is easier to remain silent. They do not defend the innocent, not because they approve of injustice, but because they fear inconvenience. The greatest victories of darkness are not won by those who do evil, but by those who allow it to happen through inaction. A righteous person does not wait for perfect circumstances to act. There will never be an ideal moment to stand for truth, to do what is right, to reject corruption. Those who delay obedience to righteousness in the hope of an easier time will find that time never comes. The longer one hesitates, the stronger the grip of apathy becomes. The time to do what is right is always now, for every moment wasted in hesitation is a moment surrendered to that which opposes righteousness. Righteousness is not dependent on recognition or reward. The truly righteous act not because they seek approval, but because they cannot do otherwise. They do not calculate the benefits of their virtue, nor do they measure the cost of their integrity. They act rightly because righteousness is not something they put on and take off, it is who they are. Those who do good only when it is noticed, when it is praised, when it benefits them, are not truly righteous. They are merely performing virtue for the sake of gain. True righteousness exists even in obscurity, even in rejection, even in suffering. The pursuit of righteousness does not mean perfection. No one is without fault, and no one acts rightly at all times. But the difference between the righteous and the unrighteous is found in their response to failure. The unrighteous excuse their wrongs, justify their failings, and make peace with their weaknesses. The righteous, however, recognize their faults, correct their missteps, and continually strive to do better. It is not the absence of failure that defines a righteous person, but the refusal to accept failure as an endpoint. The weight of the world's corruption does not excuse the individual from personal responsibility. It is easy to look at the vastness of injustice and assume that one person's actions make no difference. But righteousness is not about changing the entire world at onset. It is about doing what is right in one's own sphere, in one's own life, in every moment given. Darkness is pushed back not by grand gestures alone, but by the countless daily acts of righteousness performed by those who refuse to surrender to the tide of apathy and moral compromise. The mind is the battlefield where victory or defeat is first determined. Every outward action, every spoken word, and every habit begins as a thought. Corruption does not start with a sudden act of evil. It starts with a single compromised thought that is entertained rather than dismissed. If a person does not guard their mind, they leave the gates open for deception, weakness, and ultimately destruction. A person's thoughts shape their reality. What the mind dwells on, the heart begins to desire, and what the heart desires, the body eventually follows. If one constantly meditates on fear, then fear will rule them. If one constantly indulges in bitterness, then resentment will take root. If one allows lies to linger in their mind, then those lies will soon become their truth. The thoughts a person allows to remain in their mind determine the course of their life. The greatest weapon against corruption is discernment. Not every thought that enters the mind deserves a place. Some thoughts are like invaders, seeking only to destroy. Others come disguised as harmless distractions, but, when entertained, grow into full-fledged temptations. Just as a gatekeeper discerns who is allowed into a city, a person must be vigilant about what they permit into their mind. Every idea, every image, every word, heard or read, must be examined. Does it bring wisdom or confusion, strength or weakness, truth or deception? Corruption often begins with the normalization of what was once unthinkable. What is shocking today becomes tolerable tomorrow and acceptable the day after. This is how moral decay spreads not by direct confrontation, but by gradual desensitization. When a person allows their mind to become accustomed to impurity, dishonesty, or selfishness, they no longer resist it. What was once a clear evil becomes something they justify, something they excuse, and eventually something they embrace. A mind that is left unguarded is vulnerable to external influence. The world is filled with voices, media, entertainment, peer pressure, cultural trends, all seeking to shape thoughts, redefine morality, and shift perceptions of truth. If a person does not actively guard their mind, they will be molded by these influences without even realizing it. The undisciplined mind absorbs everything it encounters, while the disciplined mind filters, questions, and rejects anything that does not align with truth. Guarding the mind requires the rejection of passivity. A person cannot merely hope for their thoughts to remain pure. They must actively take control of their mental landscape. This means being intentional about what is read, watched, listened to, and engaged with. It means choosing to meditate on what strengthens rather than what weakens. It means recognizing when a thought is leading toward destruction and casting it out before it takes root. Not all battles of the mind are loud. Some are subtle wars fought in moments of boredom, exhaustion, or distraction. The mind is most vulnerable when it is idle. When a person allows their mind to wander without purpose, it drifts toward whatever is easiest, whatever is most immediate, whatever is most stimulating. This is why discipline in thought is crucial. A person must train themselves to think with intention, to direct their thoughts toward what is meaningful, rather than allowing them to be hijacked by whatever is most convenient. The mind is not merely something to be defended, it must also be nourished. Just as a body requires food to remain strong, the mind requires truth, wisdom, and virtue to thrive. If a person fills their mind with shallow distractions, it will become weak and incapable of resisting corruption. But if they feed their mind with knowledge, insight, and wisdom, it will be fortified against deception. The strongest defense against falsehood is a mind that is saturated with truth. Corrupt thoughts do not always come from external sources. Often, they arise from within. The human heart is prone to selfishness, pride, and fear. Even when external influences are removed, a person must still guard against their own internal weaknesses. This requires honestian ability to recognize when one's thoughts are leading them astray. A person cannot fight against what they refuse to acknowledge. Self-deception is one of the greatest dangers, for the mind that lies to itself cannot be trusted to discern what is right. A disciplined mind is a mind at peace. Chaos, anxiety, and confusion often stem from an unguarded mind that has been filled with too many conflicting voices, too many unchecked influences, too many unchallenged lies. But when a person takes control of their thoughts, rejecting what is false and embracing what is true, their mind becomes a place of clarity, stability, and strength. This is not an easy task, nor is it a one-time decision. It is a daily battle, but one that must be fought if one wishes to live free from corruption. Evil does not retreat because of a single act of defiance. It flees in the face of relentless resistance. Many believe that one great moment of strength is enough to secure victory, but in reality, the battle against darkness is not won in a single day. Persistence is the key. Those who stand firm for a time but grow weary will find themselves overtaken in the end. It is not enough to resist once resistance must become a way of life. The forces of darkness are patient. They do not always attack with overwhelming force. Often, they test a person's endurance. A temptation resisted today will return tomorrow. A thought cast out today will try to creep in again. If a person does not remain vigilant, they will find that what they once rejected has gradually become acceptable to them. The enemy knows that if it cannot break a person in one moment, it can wear them down over time. Persistence is the only safeguard against such subtle attacks. Many people fall not because they lack strength, but because they lack consistency. They stand firm for a time, but then grow complacent. They discipline themselves for a season, but then relax their guard. They fight hard in moments of crisis, but neglect the small daily battles. But true resistance is not occasional, it is constant. It is not a burst of effort followed by rest. It is a continual posture of defiance against anything that seeks to weaken, corrupt, or enslave. Fatigue is the great enemy of persistence. Darkness does not need to overpower a person if it can simply exhaust them. When the mind is weary, when the heart is discouraged, when the will is drained, resistance weakens. This is why those who wish to endure must find ways to renew their strength. Rest is not the enemy of persistence. True rest, the kind that restores the soul and fortifies the spirit, is necessary for endurance. But there is a difference between rest and surrender. To take a moment to regain strength is wisdom. To lay down one's defenses out of exhaustion is defeat. The mind plays tricks on those who resist for a long time. It whispers that the battle is pointless, that the struggle is too hard, that no real progress is being made. But this is deception. Every act of resistance, no matter how small, weakens the grip of darkness. Every time a person refuses to give in, they grow stronger, even if they do not feel it in the moment. Just as a tree's roots grow deeper in the storm, the soul grows stronger through persistent resistance. Persistence is not passive endurance, it is active defiance. To persist is not merely to suffer through difficulties, but to fight back with unwavering determination. It is the choice to get up again after every fall. It is the refusal to accept defeat even after multiple setbacks. It is the decision to keep moving forward even when progress seems slow. Those who persist do not wait for circumstances to improve. They create the conditions for victory through sheer determination. The most dangerous moment in any battle is the moment a person begins to believe they have already won. Complacency is the downfall of many who once stood strong. They assume that because they resisted in the past, they will automatically resist in the future. But persistence requires constant awareness. The enemy does not disappear simply because one has been victorious before. It waits for a moment of weakness, a lapse in vigilance, an opening left unguarded. Resistance is strongest when it is reinforced by habit. A person who trains themselves to say no to small temptations will find it easier to reject larger ones. A person who disciplines themselves daily will not be easily shaken when trials come. Persistence is not only about endurance in difficult moments, it is about building a way of life that naturally resists corruption. Those who rely only on willpower in times of crisis will find themselves unprepared. Those who have developed a lifestyle of resistance will stand firm without needing to think twice. Isolation weakens resistance. Those who fight alone often fall because they have no one to support them in their moments of weakness. Persistent resistance is strengthened by community, by accountability, by surrounding oneself with others who share the same commitment to standing against darkness. A single soldier may grow tired, but an army that stands together can fight indefinitely. Those who wish to persist must seek out allies, for even the strongest will falter if they stand alone for too long. There is no finish line in the fight against corruption. The moment one stops resisting is the moment one begins to fall. Persistence does not mean never failing, it means never staying down. The difference between those who are overcome and those who remain victorious is not perfection, but perseverance. Those who rise after every fall, who stand after every attack, who refuse to surrender, no matter how weary they become, these are the ones who will see darkness flee from their lives